welcome back to the Hungaroring for the fifth race of the fascinating so far 2016 FIA Formula 3 European Championship campaign. We've had 4 races and we've had 4 different winners so far. 3 separate winners in the first event of the season at Paul Ricard in France. And then a new face on the top step of the podium in Ralph Aron, the rookie driver, taking a victory in a very, very lively race. One of the best Formula 3 races anybody can remember, especially here at the Hungaroring, where overtaking was supposed to be at a premium. In fact, there was plenty of it in the first race. There were issues with drivers having real big struggles with tyres and dropping out of the race as a result. There were drivers that went well in the first half that fell back in the second half. There were drivers who started steadily and then flew through the order in the second half of the race. It was a really, really lively and fascinating race with plenty of talking points. There on screen you can see that Nick Cassidy continues to lead the championship, which he did after the first event of the season at Paul Ricard, but by a reduced margin because Nick, I'm afraid, failed to finish in the first race. He still leads, but not by anywhere near as many points as he did coming into the weekend. So just 7 points clear now of Lance Stroll on 47, and Max Gunther is third on 45. They are all with the Prema Power team. And also you have Ralph Aron up into the top 5 in the championship now as well. So there on screen you can see the starting grid for this race. Max Gunther is on pole position for all 3 races this weekend, but he struggled to get the car off the line as well as he would have liked in race number 1, and that really compromised his race because the German driver dropped straight down to 4th position in the race, and it was a real dogfight thereafter. It looked like he was quick, but he just couldn't get back through, and then he had a problem with the car right at the end of the race after the checkered flag, so had to walk back to the pits. But he's got another go here from pole position. He'll be on pole again tomorrow, so if he can get the start sorted out, there is no reason why Max can't take a second race victory of the season to follow on from the one he picked up in France. So there on the grid you can see our pole position driver Max Gunther, the 18-year-old from Bavaria, really likeable young man and a very talented driver with the Prema Power team. He's come up through single-seater racing in Germany, the ADAC Formal Masters Championship, in which he was twice a runner-up in 2013 and 2014. First season in the FIA European Formula 3 Championship with Muka Motorsport last year. Got 1 win last season in his rookie year at the Hungaroring, the street circuit in Germany. Ralph Aron then, this talented young driver who is being coached by Marco Asma, who ex-F1, the ex-British Formula 3 superstar, who was champion in 2007, the Estonian, still racing strong, Marco Asma, racing in things like the Dubai 24 Hours and doing pretty well last year. And that's his young charge, Ralph Aron, in his first season, having stepped up from Italian Formula 4, which he was the champion of last year. Both he and Guan Yu Zhu, who are competing in this championship, the top 2 in the Italian F4 Championship last year. This, the next natural progression on the ladder. And the second qualifying time, which gave us the grid for this one, had the faster times, 1 minute 33.6 seconds for Max Gunther. And that is more than 2 seconds quicker than the pole time Esteban Ocon set here 2 years ago, the last time the championship raced in Hungary. There you saw Sergio Sette Camara, who's going to be starting this race third on the grid. Sergio is starting to pick up some good points now, and he's just outside the top 10 in the championship. He had a strong first race to come through to finish in 7th position. And there is another very talented young rookie, Guan Yu Zhu, second in the Italian Formula 4 Championship last year, a junior karting European champion. And when he stepped up into the seniors, which is very competitive in 125cc Rotax Max racing, he almost won that championship as well, finishing a very close second in the end. So doing lots of his early part of his career based in the UK and racing in the British Championships. And one to watch, he's backed by Ferrari. Sergio Sette Camara, who you saw, backed by Red Bull. So they've got their eyes on these young drivers. And here is George Russell, who was the driver who led the opening laps of the first race. Got a great start from the outside of row number 1. He's 5th on the grid for this one, but the tyre degradation that he suffered was immense. He dropped off a cliff. He actually came into the pits, had a chat with David Hale from the team from High Tech GP during the break between the races, and he said that George had come into the pits actually feeling that he must have a puncture. It was that bad. The car really did drop off a cliff in terms of performance. David saying actually the team has had no tyre issues whatsoever up until that race, so very strange indeed. Nick Cassidy was another one that dropped out of the race, and I chatted with Nick earlier as well, and he said there was no other technical problems, it was purely the tyres. They just really did degrade on him, and he's slightly worried that he's not going to have enough sets for tomorrow because he's blistered one set in qualifying already. used 2 new tyres for that last race, Nick Cassidy, which are now no good. And if it doesn't rain tomorrow, he fears that the one remaining good set of tyres he's got, which he's going to have to use for this race, there's no way he's going to get decent laps out of them tomorrow as well. But there is a chance it might rain tomorrow, so that might be a saving grace for him. But yeah, certainly struggling. There's Ben Barnicoat, who had a good race through to get into the points in race number 1, also with the high-tech GP team, backed by the Racing Steps Foundation, and having raced in the Formula Renault Euro Cup last year. He's going to be starting 8th on the grid, as you saw there. And there's Lance Stroll. Now, Lance is somebody who likes to win races and get on podiums, but he's also been very consistent so far this year. He's had the 1 DNF, which was an incident that he just got caught up in. Wasn't really... it was just bad luck more than anything else in that race. But otherwise, he's been very consistent. So he's won a race already. But when he hasn't been winning, he's been picking up good points. And 4th place in the first race earlier on today was actually a good result, because Nick Cassidy, who's leading the championship, of course, didn't finish. Lance picked up 4th place, closed the gap down to 7 points. Max Gunther finished 5th, which is absolutely not what he wanted from pole position. But again, he closed the gaps to the points leader, Nick Cassidy. And there is Nico Carey, who got his maiden podium in Formula 3 in only his 2nd weekend of racing. Didn't take long, did it? 5 races. We have had including this one, and already he's called himself a race winner, a race podium finisher rather, having finished 2nd to Ralph Aron. So Ralph Aron winning on his 4th attempt, Nico Carey getting onto the podium on his 4th attempt in Formula 3, and Joel Eriksson in his 4th attempt getting his 2nd podium, because he was on the podium, 3rd place in the last race of the opening weekend at Paul Ricard in France. He got another 3rd place finish earlier on today. And apart from Nick Cassidy, he's the only driver that has had 2 back-to-back podiums so far. Nick getting 3 on the trot with 3 second-place finishes in that first weekend. Mikkel Jensen, who sort of struggled a little bit in qualifying, but had a decent race through to get a point, finish in 10th place. And he's with the KFZ Tyler Muka Motorsport team, driving solo. David Batman, who is going to be joining the championship at the next round at Pau. He's only not racing now because he's not quite old enough. He's not 16 in time for this race, so he's had to miss the first 2 rounds. There's Ryan Vetter, the American driver with the Carlin Motorsport team, back with that team for the 2nd year, based in the UK, 21 years of age, and with the Jagonia IM with Carlin satellite team last year. A couple of 10th place finishes in the championship in 2015, one at Zandvoort, one in Portugal at Portimao. Raced in the Toyota Racing Series prior to coming into F3. Callum Ilott, the first time we saw him in the race was at turn 2 in the gravel. We didn't see what caused it, but apparently there was a little bit of liveliness through the first couple of corners. Callum came off worst, and that was why he ended up in the gravel. But I had a word with Fritz van Amersfoort, who have had so much success in recent years, and Fritz just shaking his head saying it's just one of those circuits where we just don't seem to be able to find the pace that we normally have at other circuits. Even though it's been resurfaced since last time we raced here, we're still struggling to get a good setup here. They've got new engines as well. They had VW engines previous to this season. Now they've switched to Mercedes. But it's just not, for whatever reason, a track that suits the team. But Callum Ilott's still already a race winner this year, maybe with a chance to come through. Let's see what he can do in this race. But a bit of work to do for him from 14th on the grid. You saw Pedro Piquet looking resplendent in the Brabham-style livery, which, of course, Nelson Piquet, his father, used to race in. Pedro Piquet, 17. He's come from Brazilian Formula 3. He's twice been a champion in that, and is the son of the 3 times Formula 1 world champion, Nelson Piquet, who won titles, his first 2 titles with Brabham in that famous 1981 and 1983 seasons, in particular the B152, which Gordon Murray designed. And Gordon went on to design cars for McLaren for Formula 1, McLaren for Le Mans as well, which was the first car to win on its debut at Le Mans. And the fantastic McLaren road car, which set records when it was first launched. So that was one of his early projects, winning the title with Nelson Piquet. He went on to win the 3rd title in 1987, when he was the fierce rival, of course, of Nigel Mansell of Williams, and winning that title just ahead of Nigel Mansell. That titanic battle in the Silverstone British Grand Prix, I remember that year, when Nigel had to make an extra pit stop, charged after Nelson and snatched the win with a dummy move down the hangar straight down towards Stoke Corner. So here we are then, ready for the 5th race of the season. It's the FIA Formula 3 European Championship. Chris Hartley here, trackside, to talk you through what I'm sure is going to be another fantastic race, bearing in mind all the issues that drivers, some drivers, not all, have been having with their tyres. Managing your tyres is going to be absolutely critical here, and nobody managed their tyres better than Joel Eriksson in the first race, where everybody else was going slower for the last 5-6 laps. He was going quicker, set the fastest lap after fastest lap, and charged down after the top two. And had the race been another couple of laps longer, he might have even been higher than third place. The problem for Joel is he had by his own admission, back qualifying session for races 2 and 3, and so he's back in 11th spot on the grid, the Motor Park driver. But Motor Park with some good young talents in the team. Joel Eriksson, Nico Carey and Guan Yuju, 3 of their drivers have already been up onto the podium this season. There you can see the graphics on the screen to show you that. We've got Max Gunther and Ralph Aron on the front row, Sergio Sette Câmara and Guan Yuju starting on row 2, George Russell and Nick Cassidy on row 3. With points to prove here. Alessio Lorandi, who had a really good race through into the top 6 in race number 1. Carlin driving the Italian. And Ben Barneycoat on row 4. On row 5, Lance Stroll and Nico Carey. And then starting on row 6, Joel Eriksson and Mikkel Jensen. On row 7, Ryan Vetter and Callum Eilert. Row 8, Pedro Piquet and Nikita Mazepin, who is back in the race now. He was forced to miss race 1 after being kicked out of the race by the officials following an incident in the paddock after free practice, but he's back racing for the rest of the weekend now. The Russian driver, another rookie to come into Formula 3. Row 9, Harrison Newey, who showed very well in the first weekend of the season at Paul Ricard, but hasn't quite had things go his way so far here in Hungary. Arjun Maini likewise struggling big time with the car ever since they got here for the test day on Wednesday. And then on the final row, to complete the 20 cars on the grid, Zycon Leo Peterlee and Antoine Hubert, who has to start last because he had to change the engine. The engine problem was what caused him to retire from race number 1, so he's had to change the engine, which means, as a rule, then he'll drop to the back of the grid, dropping the 10th place grid penalty, which puts him down in 20th position. So that is how they line up here at the Hungaroring, a circuit where Lewis Hamilton has 4 times been a Grand Prix winner. Michael Schumacher 4 times a winner here as well. Last year the Grand Prix won by Sebastian Vettel for Ferrari, and still of course a very active Grand Prix circuit. 30 years since its first Grand Prix in 1986. The original idea was to run a street course around the park in Budapest, but they built this circuit instead, and we're delighted they did because the racing so far has been excellent. The red lights come on, and we are about to go racing once again here at Hungaroring for the 5th race of the season. This time, Max Gunther makes a tremendous start. He's put that right, hasn't he? Straight to the lead of the race. That was perfect. Ralph Aron, who's good at starts as well, he's there in 2nd place. George Russell is trying to come around the outside though. He's 3rd, he wants to be in 2nd place, George Russell. 1 or 2 others drifting out wide further back. We've got a spin for Nick Cassidy, I'm afraid, who I hope will be able to get going again, but he's going to be right at the back of the field. George Russell still fighting hard, and he's going to tuck into 3rd place. Guan Yuju is side by side with Sergio Sette Câmara for 4th place in the Red Bull livery there. They're still wheel to wheel as they drop down the hill now through turns 2 and 3 and rising up there through turn 4. Somebody off through the gravel in the background at the tail of the field, but should keep going. And Guan Yuju was able to fend off Sergio Sette Câmara. Alessio Lorandi's made a good start, as has in the bright orange Muka Motorsport car. Mikkel Jensen making a decent start as well. But a very, very brave start for George Russell around the outside, who was ruining his bad luck at the end of that qualifying session at Paul Ricard, which saw him drop to the back of the grid when he'd qualified 2nd. He was ruining his bad luck at the end of the first race when he'd led, and he'd done so well to fend them off at a car which was clearly struggling with its tyres, before ultimately he dropped out of the points and then had to retire the car. So you get the sense that George is in determined mood to try and change things around here. Alessio Lorandi fighting hard, always great to watch, and the Carlin Power car onto the tail of Sergio Sette Câmara now in the Motor Park car, the Red Bull liveried car. The Brazilian has also got close company with Mikkel Jensen in the back of that train as well here at the end of this race, which is going to be a 33-minute plus 1 lap race. There you can see the white nose cone, the red car, the Ferrari back driver, Guan Yuju, the Chinese driver, who's just about one of the most chilled out people in the paddock, where everybody else is getting ready to come racing. He's usually out kicking about playing football. It doesn't slow him down though, does it? It looks like the inside of George Russell here. George has to stay wide to avoid them. It's good driving, they're still wheel to wheel. George has got the inside line. They both then settle back into their original positions. So it's still Gunther and Arrow on the top 2. Russell in 3rd place, 4th place Guan Yuju, 5th position at the end of the first lap, Sergio Sette Câmara, Then we got Lorandi in 6th, Mikkel Jensen 7th, Lance Stroll through in 8th place, Callum Eilert up to 9th, good start for him, Ben Barnicoat in 10th place. Incident in turn 1 under investigation. That was the incident that saw Nick Cassidy, well, yes, the incident that saw Nick Cassidy facing in the wrong direction. Nico Carey has not come through, so he's disappeared, gone into the pits. Peter Lee's gone into the pits. There is Nico Carey in the other Red Bull car. Now that's having a front left tyre change, so when he saw the tyre being changed, we have to assume that probably he picked up a puncture there, and whether that was a puncture that caused the problem or something else that caused the puncture, we'll find out later on. But remember, race number 1 was 2 different races in one. People that went quick at the start really struggled at the end. People that were steady at the start were able to charge through at the end. So tyre management's going to be something to consider here. And the team's still trying to get their head around it. It's a super smooth surface now, not bumpy like it used to be. Ben Barnicoat was saying to me, much smoother now than when he raced here in Formula Renault. That's the very pleasant spring day, but certainly some teams, not everybody, having issue trying to keep the tyres lively throughout the course of the race. So Harrison Newey there, getting up the inside of Antoine Hubert, his Van Amersfoort Racing teammate, so the British driver ahead of the Frenchman who's having to come from the back of the field. Just saw that going through shots. Alessio Lorandi started to pull away now from the 7th place Muga Motorsport car of Mikkel Jensen. At the end of the second lap, Max Gunther leads by 1.3 seconds. Veron is 2.4 position. So this battle which is going on in the points, because the last of the points runners at the moment in 10th game with the live. The 19-year-old, very amicable 19-year-old. Successful driver in other categories before coming into this, but absolutely loving driving these cars. He was saying to us, I think I said to you in race number 1, he was beaming when he was talking to me around the lap in some of the corners. There's huge amounts of heavy braking, like turn 1, turn 14, and then other corners where huge amounts of speed are carried with all of the downforce that you get on these Formula 3 cars. So, you know, Max Gunther having overcome this obstacle which has really hindered him a couple of times this season. It wasn't just in race number 1 that he struggled to get the car into the corner first from a good position, from pole position, but he had a similar issue in at least one of the races at Paul Ricard. But now that was nailed. That was just about as good a start as you could see, and that's testament to him, because there must have been quite a bit of pressure on him to get that start right, quite a bit of pressure on himself. When you're on pole, there's only one way to go, and that's to win the race, and anything less is disappointment. Everybody's expecting you to win in a sense, so you know, lots of pressure there in that moment where the red lights went out and he had to drop the clutch, but did a great job, and as a result he leads. And once he got the lead, it's not surprised to see him up front, because, as I said, in the race earlier on today, he was definitely quick, but he couldn't find his way through the battle. Incident at turn 1 to be investigated after the race, it is being said. Just other news coming from the first race to update you on is that Harrison Newey received a 5-second penalty for exceeding track limits, but that was the only penalty that was applied in relation to action on the track. So there's George Russell in 3rd place, number 12 in the high-tech GP car, and chasing him down, Guan Yu Zhu. Sergio Sete Camara is hanging on, the Brazilian. Got a very international field in this first 6 or 7 cars in the race, because a German driver leaves, an Estonian is 2nd, we've got a British driver 3rd, a Chinese driver 4th, a Brazilian 5th, an Italian in 6th, the Dane in 7th, the Canadian in 8th place. Couldn't be much more international, could it? A glance in the mirrors for George Russell, and he was okay for the first third of the race, really, in race number 1, but then it was when the tyres really struggled and started to degrade and forced him to, well, seriously defend for a number of laps before eventually they came through. And a little bit of movement further back in the top 10. We've got Tveter and Piquet and Joel Eriksson together. Joel Eriksson trying to work his way up into the points from 11th on the grid. And here we've got this battle for 3rd place, climbing up towards the left-hander at turn 4. Then George Russell getting under more and more pressure now. And the motor park driver, Guan Yu Zhu, in the red car with his team mate Sergio Camara equally as quick here as they make their way around the back of the circuit. Much more undulating circuit than you might think. Through the chicane they go, turns 8 and 9, through this sequence of bends then at turns 10, 11 and 12. Going to get a replay of just how close it got between these two. George Russell coming under attack there. Looked like Guan Yu had to almost pull out of the slipstream to avoid running into the back of George Russell there. And did a good job to react as quickly as he did. I'll also point out that blue and bright green car, which is starting to catch everybody up here. Alessio Lorandi, who was very quick once he got through the traffic in the first race. So he, I think, is going to be joining this little train of cars battling over the final podium-paying position in the not-too-distant future. Accelerating out of turn 16, then down towards the hard braking zone for the almost 90-degree right-hander at turn at number 1. Over the crest there, it's like downhill into the first corner. Russell just covering off his line. A lock-up, drifts wide. Guan Yu has got better traction. He's on the inside line here, but there's a left-hander coming up. George Russell has just got to sit where he is and make sure that car is wide enough as they go into the apex. Trying to get up the inside is Sergio Camara. They're going to be wheel-to-wheel here for 4th place. Camara close, but not quite close enough. He's got a gut run, though, coming down onto the back straight as they climb up now through this super quick left-hander at turn 4. Blind entry to that as well. Ben Bodycote was saying to me yesterday, you can't see the apex, you just got to guess where the corner is when you're so low slung in these cars. Real drivers track this, very physical as well. Very fit young men, these drivers, who all spend lots of time in the gym. They're professionals, training the right parts of their body so they're as fit as they can be for the race and for the season. And going towards the back parts of the circuit now, going uphill into turn 14, and then it goes down into that left at turn 15, the hairpin coming up, and then they climb up again towards turn 16. Running wide there is Sergio Camara, downhill now, all the weight's on the front of the car, into the left-hander through 15, and then they climb up through 16 and accelerate out, back onto the start-finish straight. Nigel the Ferrari, pulling off a rather splendid move on out centre with a back marker involved back in the 80s or early 90s, coming out of turn 15 and that run up towards the last corner, a corner where you're not supposed to overtake, but Nigel Mansell was never really one for following rules of what you were and weren't supposed to do in a race car. Neither, it seems, of these Formula 3 drivers. Apparently you can't overtake in Formula 3 at the Hungaroring. Tear up that form, but throw it out the window, because it was a tremendous race earlier on, which got better and better as the race went on. So expect fireworks in the remaining 10 or 12 minutes of the race here. So here we're going to get a replay. And this is when Sergio Camara just drifted a little bit wide there. In terms of track limits, he won't be. Yeah, that's something they won't look into, because it's not deliberately trying to gain an advantage. There were a couple of drivers that ran straight here at the chicane, Max Gunther once or twice, but no action was taken. And certainly FIA stewards are not just there to punish, but to try and educate the drivers, as we get a replay here of number 11, Nikita Mazepin, the Russian driver, gaining a place on Antoine Hubert, the French driver, from the back of the field with his new engine on board. And yes, certainly there were a couple of instances. I think Ryan Vettel was one that gained a place when he went through the chicane, but then straight away gave it back, and the FIA stewards were congratulating him on quick thinking and doing the right thing. So they're not, they're not always here to punish the FIA. They're here to develop and educate the driving standards. And if drivers exceed the track limits in a race where you had no choice, you had to avoid somebody, or there was a race incident, they're not going to come down straight on them. It's when they're doing something consistently to gain an advantage, which was certainly the case, as I said earlier, in practice, where we had 400 or so offences of drivers having their lap times taken away, which was an average of 20 per driver, which is pretty immense. But it got much, much better. There were hardly any warnings in the first race, and I don't think any so far in this one. So here you can see, still going well, George Russell. He hasn't got the pace of the two leaders, but bear in mind that Ralph Aron, once he got the lead of the race from George Russell, 7.5 seconds up the road, and then really by the two motor park drivers, Nico Kari and the very quick Swedish driver, as I said, was mega at the end of the race there, Joel Eriksson. So George Russell still soaking up the pressure here. Tyres seem to be holding up so far. George hasn't got the pace at the top two. Gunther and Aaron are both doing 1 minute 35.7s, although George Russell last time around did do a personal best lap, 1 minute 35.4. So although he's 5.7 seconds down on the race leader, the gap has sort of steadied now, which is good news for George Russell. Guan Yu Zhu is going with him, slightly quicker at times, but not able to find a way through. Sergio Sedi in the low 1 minute 35s as well. Alessio Larandi's falling away from them, 1 minute 35.9 last time around. And then the next group, led by Mikkel Jensen and Lance Stroll, 7th and 8th, are a couple of tenths slower, 1 minute 36s, low 1 minute 36s. Personal best for the race leader, Gunther and Aaron through the third sector. And on that lap, Max Gunther pulling away by 0.3 of a second from his teammate. So Gunther looking for his second win of the season, looking again to close the points gap to Nick Cassidy, who is still running, but the tail end of the field in 18th place and unlikely to score any points again in this one after such a good start to the season at Paul Ricard, where he was just about the only driver to get 3 consistent results with 3 second place finishes, very nearly a race win. He led the vast majority of race 2 until the rain affected race, that race. That conditions caught him out and he had a moment 2/3 of the way through the race, which dropped him from 1st to 3rd, before eventually, on the restart, after a late safety car, he was able to pass Guan Yu Zhu for 2nd position with a very tidy move. The New Zealander, he was dovetailing this with a campaign in Japan. He raced in Japanese Formula 3 last year. He was racing in Super GT for Lexus this year. Does a lot of worldwide travel, and he's got to miss 1 round at Spielberg of this championship. That's the only round that clashes. But otherwise, he's doing the full season for the first time after a few guest drives over the last couple of seasons. But there is certainly a chance that Max Gunther is going to move ahead of him, maybe Lance Stroll too, in the points after this race. A replay here of Pedro Piquet with a nice move down the inside there. It was of Joel Eriksson, I think, to gain a place. Pedro did pull off some good moves earlier on, and with a flapping front wing, in comes Eriksson to the pits then. So a great first race, but he's going to get nothing from this one, I'm afraid. The number 22 car comes in, and the Swedish driver, who's had 2 podium finishes on the bounce, is on the way in to get a front wing change. That's going to, well, not drop him out of the points, because he was already out of the points, but it's going to drop him to the tail end of the field. So to give you a rundown, Max Gunther leads the race, but by 1.2 seconds. That gap came down by half a second last time around to Ralph Aron, his teammate, who, make no mistake, he's a rookie, but I think has got his eyes set on the championship title, Ralph Aron. He's got a lot of self-belief, and rightly so. That's not to say at all that he's arrogant with it. He's just confident. He's a very likeable, very approachable young man, but you can see the steely determined in his eyes when you talk to him, and he's very self-critical, and he's very determined to keep improving. So if there's a chance of a win, he'll go for it, I'm sure. That was the number 11 machine, the high-tech car of Nikita Mazepin, making another move. So he's up to 13th place now. Harrison Newey's dropped down to 14th position. So Max Gunther leads, Ralph Aron 2nd, but closing. George Russell still 3rd. There in 4th place is Guan Yu Zhu. There is Joel Eriksson out of the car and taking a retirement, I'm afraid. Not too much point carrying on, I suppose. I think they'd be able to fix the front ring easily enough, but is he going to get any points? And actually, do you not want to save your tyres if you possibly can and save the car as well? So electing to pull out of the race there, unless there's another underlying issue that we don't know about. So there's 3rd and 4th. Just behind them, going down towards turn at number 1, we've got Sergio Sedi, and Guan Yu Zhu suddenly fires one up the inside here to get 3rd place. Lovely move, that. He sat patient for a few laps and no opportunities have come, but that one came. He sort of made it, really, from quite a long way back. Guan Yu Zhu, again, really proving himself here in his first season of racing, that he is not scared to have a go. He held his own beautifully in the races at Paul Ricard, came forwards a lot. George Russell now conceding the position. George will try and get it back at some point, but he's also got to be mindful of the fact that Sergio Sedi and Alessio Larandi are just behind him. Larandi in 6th place. Mikkel Jensen is 7th. Lance Stroll is in 8th place. Callum Eilert 9th. Ben Barnicoat 10th. Ryan Tveta in 11th. Pedro Piquet in 12th place. It's Oliver Oaks, high-tech GP team. Chatting with David Howells earlier on. And what a quick turnaround it's been for that team. They only got the premises last January, and few months later, they opened it up, based at Silverstone, and by the end of last year, they were going out racing as well. I think Sim's having a couple of races, guest races with the team in this championship, and here they are for a full season, hitting the ground running. Lots of old names and faces in there. David Hell running the original high-tech team in British Formula 3 back in the day. In fact, they ran Marco Asma, who is the driver coach of Hungaroring, to the title in 2007, the same season that T-Sport ran Sergio Perez to the national class title in the British Championship. Cars 2 and 5 are being watched for track limits. They are Nick Cassidy and Pedro Piquet. And the eagle eyes of the official. He watches, finds a gap, goes through, and then has to defend on the way out of the corner from Sergio Camara down into turn 2, but he makes it stick, and that was another good move. So Lorandi up to 5th place now with that, and again that was last dash manoeuvre coming from a fairly long way back and just popping out at the last millisecond to create a gap and spring a surprise. So Lorandi with a well-timed move there. This is turning into his best weekend for a little while. He certainly shone at times last year, but also had his moments in the races as well. But the pace was there. Came straight out of karting, like Max Verstappen had, straight from karting into Formula 3. Lorandi, well respected in international karting circles, was a world champion, junior world champion, only a few years ago in 2013. And certainly there were promise shown from him last year. He was only 20th in the championship for Van Amersfoort, but got a 6th place finish around the streets of Po. And in the end, finished 9th in the rookie standings and certainly showed good pace at times. But now he switched to the Carlin team. Second season, you expect more of a driver. They know the circuits, they know the feel of the cars. A new team for him, but a very established one in Carlin Motorsport, of course. Trevor Carlin's team. Who also in lots of success in other junior single-seater formula with other drivers this year, and involved over in the States as well with one or two drivers in Indy Lights racing. So we've got Ed Jones is one of them, who raced in Formula 3 of course a few years ago. We've got George Russell in 4th place, falling away now from Guan Yu Zhu and coming under close scrutiny from that man, number 4, Alessio Lorandi, the Carlin driver, who, having got past Sergio Camara a lap and a half ago, has managed to fend him off and now got back into his rhythm and set about his next target. But it's good to see that the high-tech car of George Russell, which by this stage of the first race was really struggling and not long after retired from the race, well, it's holding up this time. George Russell lapping 1 minute 35.5, so on a similar pace to the race leaders now. 1 or 2 tenths slower, but not dramatically so. But Guan Yu Zhu, having been released, is going very quickly indeed. 1 minute 34.8 is the quickest man on the track at the moment, Guan Yu Zhu. 1:34.8 for him. 1:30 seconds quicker. And in the 1:35s, Max Gunther is the race leader. I haven't seen too much of the two leaders, but it's 2.5 seconds between them. Gunther from gap. We'll see what he does on this lap. Now, having said that Sergio Camara had started to fall away from Alessio Lorandi, Camara is now got his bit between his teeth and wants the place back. He looks to the inside is covered. So the Brazilian tries the outside, that's covered as well. And again, he'll have to follow the gearbox of Lorandi down the hill into turns 2 and 3, I think, unless he tries something pretty spectacular. But certainly on a bit of a lock-up from Lorandi there, who's defending, and it's all allowing George Russell to get back away from the pair of them. So Seti Camara getting obviously a good run coming out of turn 16 and closing the gap down towards the first corner. Not quite able to find a way through because Lorandi was pretty good at defending his position there and putting the car in the right place. Through turn 7 they go, now towards the chicane. There's not really one corner in particular that makes a big difference to your lap time, but this is a sequence of corners. Through 2 or 3 more corners, they all flow into one another. And if you don't accelerate properly coming out of one corner, it really affects you for 3 or 4 corners to follow before you can get your rhythm back. So there is number 17, the race leader, Max Gunther. Third in the championship points coming into this race. Now, black and white flag, a proper warning. We've had people being watched, but now we've got a black and white warning to car number 21. For, guess what? Track limits. That's Antoine Hubert. So he now gets an official warning, a black and white flag, which is the first one we've seen. So one or two names coming up being watched, but that's the first time a driver's actually going to get a warning flag for that. And Antoine currently in 15th place. In terms of the rookies, who were first, second and third for the first time in a year and a half, we had rookies taking the top 3 steps on the overall podium in race number 1. At the moment, Ralph Aron second, Guan Yu Zhu in third are the top 2 rookies, as we get a replay of Harrison Newey running wide. And third best rookie at the moment, so on for a podium, is Ben Barnicoat in 10th place. The next best one is Nikita Mazepin in 13th. So Barnicoat looking good for more points, or at least a championship point for 10th place, but also for some good rookie points. Premier Power Team lead the team standings. Each team has to nominate 2 drivers that score their points for all the races of a weekend. They can change from event to event, but once you've picked your 2 drivers for a weekend, you have to stick with them. And they lead. Motor Park are second in the championship standings. And here we can see a battle for 8th place between Lance Stroll, who is second in the championship, 7 points behind Nick Cassidy, but not getting enough points at the moment in this race to be able to close the gap sufficiently to move ahead of Nick in the standings, because at the moment he's only going to pick up 4 points for 8th place, and he's 7 behind Nick, so he'd still be behind Nick Cassidy. And Max Gunther, of course, he's on for a maximum score of 25 points, the driver third in the championship coming into this race, and that would put Max into the championship lead. He'd move from 45 to 60 points, so he'd be on 60. Nick Cassidy, if it stays like this, on 54 in second, and Lance Stroll, I think, on 51, would be still third in the championship standings. But still a long way to go. 8.5 minutes saw lots of activity, action and changes of position in the first race, and it could still be the case here. I'm still keeping an eye on the screens for Guan Yu Zhu, because he's still flying along after the top 2. We see number 11, Nikita Mazepin, who's pulled off some good moves in this race. Now onto the back of Pedro Piquet. They are running for 12th place, and Piquet's got the inside line through turn 2. The Russian driver, who missed the first race, of course, getting his rhythm together and doing good things at the moment, the high-tech driver, and he's there in 13th place. There is running wide the number 14 Arjamaini driven 3-Bond T-Sport car, which is currently in 16th place, which isn't really a true reflection of the team's or the drivers' capabilities. They're just having, I'm afraid, one of those weekends that hasn't gone right from them right from the very beginning, really. Black and white flag, another warning to Arjamaini for exceeding track limits, just to add to his woes. There then is your race leader, who's just set the fastest second sector of anybody. So suddenly he thinks, you know what, I better put my foot down here. They're starting to catch me. He's done a 1 minute 35.4 last time around. 1 minute 35.3 for Ralph Aron was a tiny bit quicker. A 1:34.9 though for Guan Yu Zhu, who has consistently, since he got into third place, been putting in lap times in the 1 minute 34s. So it means that Guan Yu Zhu, who does another 1 minute 34, this time a 1 minute 34.6, is now only just over 1.5 seconds behind Ralph Aron in second place. He took another 0.6 out of him on that lap, but certainly Max Gunther was able to respond as Sergio Sene Camara goes down the inside of Alessio Lorandi and returns the compliments. Almost the same move that Lorandi pulled on him 3 laps ago. He gets him back at the same corner in the same manner. Good bit about breaking that, and we've seen some good driving today from Sergio Sene Camara, the 17-year-old from Belo Horizonte in Brazil, 14th in the championship last year. Got onto the podium twice in 2015, once at Spa and once at the Nürburgring. So he picked the big circuits to have his big moments, and was third, as I said earlier, at the Masters race, the F3 Masters race, the very prestigious race which happens once a year at Zandvoort, with lots of famous names, including Lewis Hamilton, have won in the past. So Lorandi just perhaps struggling with the car, maybe the tyres at this stage of the race, because he's suddenly dropped a long way back, hasn't he? And so it's Gunther that leads, Aron second, Zhu in third, Russell in fourth, Alessio Lorandi up to fifth, and then we've got Camara sixth, Jensen seventh, Stroll eighth, Eilert ninth, Barnicoat still 10th, and the third best rookie, and on for a podium in terms of the rookie podium. Just under 6 minutes to go then here at the Hungaroring, plus 1 lap at the end of it all. And Max Gunther has responded to the pressure that started to come upon him by setting a couple of decent lap times. 1 minute 34.9 that time. 1:34.7, that was a bit quicker from Ralph Aron. 1 minute 34.5 for Guan Yu Zhu, who's still the quickest man on the track at the moment. We've got in the 1:35 George Russell and Sete Kamara. And 1:37 for Lorandi last time around, was just about the slowest driver out there, apart from Nick Cassidy, who's still struggling big time. 1 minute 38 he's currently doing. In the background there, in the Van Amersfoort car, number 20, Harrison Newey, seems to be struggling with grip in this race, runs wide again. 14th place, Pedro Piquet going slowly, now picks up speed again. I think that might be him recovering from a moment. There was some contacts on the way into turn 1, some pretty big contact. Pedro Piquet coming off worse from that, I'm afraid. Forced out wide, and it was him having a battle with the high-tech car of Mazepin, which has broken its front left wheel now by the looks of things. Yeah, and he's out of the race. He struggled on a little bit, but then has pulled off the circuit. So Nikita Mazepin coming together with Pedro Piquet. Piquet, well, I did say coming off worse, but I suppose Mazepin has come off worse now because he's not going to finish the race. Piquet was delayed, but I think he's still continuing, albeit now with a very slim chance of getting into the points. So we're looking at Mikkel Jensen, number 7 in the Muka Motorsport car, number 1 Lance Stroll, 2nd in the championship standings, his 2nd season of racing, and really the form driver in the back end of the 2015 season. After having at times an eventful front end to the campaign and getting at times criticism, he really did get his head down, responded brilliantly, and drove superbly in the second half of the season to set himself up nicely for a proper run at the championship title this year. Certainly with the right team, isn't he, with Prema? And we know he's got lots of pace. He's in 8th place at the moment, and again he's picking up decent points. And a long way to go. I think he said it at his press releases at the start of the weekend. He's not necessarily looking to go out and get race wins, but just to have 3 good races, 3 solid races, get some points. And you remember last season, Felix Rosenqvist was not really setting the world alight in the first half of the season. He didn't have it all of his own way, really, until the second half of the season. But he kept picking up the odd points. He kept himself in touch with the championship leaders. And then when the wins did come, he was quickly able to catch them up and won the championship in the end. Felix, with many, many years racing in the championship. The new rule this year that was brought in was that a driver can only stay in the championship for 3 years to try and keep it as a development championship and young drivers coming through. So that's the new rule. You can't spend any more than 3 years in the championship. The incident between Mazepin and Piquet is going to be investigated after the race by the stewards. So I'll look into that. We'll be hoping that there's no more trouble for him. He's already had a visit to the stewards. He doesn't really want another one. So Gunther has gone through, 2.1 seconds clear. He was being caught on that lap by Ralph Aron, but only by about 0.3 of a second. 1:34.8 for Guan Yu Zhu. So for the first time in a while, really, Guan Yu Zhu is not catching up to the 2 ahead of him. He's still not far behind Ralph Aron, only 1.3 seconds. George Russell compared to race 1, because he's just said, would never thought a way around the problem, and it's been much better for him this time. 4th place, looking pretty solid. He was caught on that lap, though, by Sergio Sette Camara, who's only 0.9 of a second behind him. Sergio Sette Camara did a lap which was 0.6 of a second quicker than George Russell. So the battle for 4th place isn't quite done yet, nor is this battle one for 7th position. Mikkel Jensen has had a queue behind him for a while now. Lance Stroll, Callum Ilott, Ben Barnicoat, all in his mirrors. Ryan Vetter's not far behind either in the number 3 Carling car, trying to get into the points. He's currently running in 11th place. Had a good 7th place finish in the second race that Paul Ricard did, Ryan Vetter. You can just see him in the background there in the blue and black car. The American driver who started his career not in karts but in Star Mazda racing over in the States. Less experience than many drivers around him, even though he's one of the older drivers at 21. But really holding his own, and that was one of his most impressive drives so far in F3, that 7th place finish at Paul Ricard. It could have been even higher. It was, I think it was up to 5th place at points in the race. And if he can get a point here, he'll be very chuffed. Standing in between him and a championship point, though, is Ben Barnicoat, just ahead of him in the red, white and blue high-tech GP car. So we've got 44 seconds left on the clock. The race leaders have already gone through, so they'll complete this lap, by which time the clock will be down to 0, and they'll have another lap at the end of it. So 2 laps to go in this second race. Hasn't quite had the sparks and the drama of the first race, but it's been interesting to watch nonetheless. Interesting to see how Max Günther has really responded to all the pressure that he must have been feeling coming into this race off the start, and then the pressure came on him 3 or 4 laps ago when Ralph Ferron and Guan Yu Zhu started to charge after him, but now he's just set the fastest lap of the entire race. Max Günther, 1 minute 34.023, and he is just in a rhythm now, just in his own zone. He's 4/10 quicker on that lap than Ralph Ferron, and looking good. There is the race leader. Ralph Ferron is now 2.5 seconds behind him. It's still mighty impressive though, isn't it, from Ferron in only his second weekend in the championship. There he is in this, the 5th race of the season, and they're just behind Guan Yu Zhu, also only in his 5th race. Used to racing against Ralph Ferron because they were big competitors for the title of the Italian Formula 4 Championship last year, of course. And these 3, then there's 10 seconds gap back to George Russell in 4th place. He'll be buoyed, I think. Would have been, I'm sure, slightly nervous of how it was going to pan out after the first race, but they have turned it around, and the car has been solid throughout. Well, it wasn't the car that was the problem, it's the off the pace in this race. Maybe slightly cooler than it was for the first race, but it's very similar, don't they, of figuring things out, finding ways around things. But you wonder if maybe he's carrying a bit of damage, possibly from the first corner incident as well. So after a great weekend in Paul Ricard, it's turning into a bit of a disaster from him for exceeding track limits. He actually ended up with 3 top 6 grid positions. So we're on the final lap of the race. Max Günther doesn't seem to be slowing down. He's just set the fastest first sector of anybody in the race so far. So really is driving nicely, Max Günther. He's on for his 2nd win. He's also on for the championship lead if it stays like this, because he'll move ahead of Nick Cassidy in the race for the points. Nick will stay 2nd in the championship, or will drop to 2nd in the championship, but he will stay ahead just by a few points of Lance Stroll. And we've of course got Ralph Ferron, who's I think probably going to move up in the standings as well. We could have Prema drivers 1st, 2nd, 3rd and 4th in the points at the end of this race. But the checkered flag is waiting, and from pole position it has been a flawless drive for Max Günther. He punches the air. That one means a lot to him. It really does, and it's well deserved. A great victory for Max Günther, 2nd of the season and the championship lead. He wins by a handsome 3.6 seconds in the end. 2nd place goes to Ralph Ferron. Guan Yu Zhu on the podium for the 2nd time in his first season of racing, in his first few weekends of racing in Formula 3. George Russell will come through to take 4th place. 5th has been Sergio Sette Camara, who's done well again today. Alessio Lorandi, fighting start, just trailed off a bit at the end, but another 6th place finish for Alessio. And in 7th place, Mikkel Jensen, just fending off Lance Stroll by 7/10 of a second. Callum Ilott was just behind him as well in 9th. Ben Barnicat in 10th. Look at that and what it means to Max Günther. That is maybe the seminal moment in the race, isn't it? Because he knows that had that race gone wrong for him, the doubts start to creep in, and other drivers start to pick holes in your driving, your weaknesses. The pressure comes on. But I tell you what, he could not have responded better. That is fantastic. So a win for him. As Pedro Piquet was in the walls a bit, that incident which will be investigated between him and Nikita Mazepin after the race. Piquet finishing in 14th place in the end. Seen some good racing from Pedro. He hasn't quite picked up the points that he might have. He's been very close to picking up points a few times and just missed out, but definitely there's potential there for the Brazilian. There then, confirmation of the provisional results after 22 laps. Max Günther wins from Ralph Ferron, who is the top rookie. 2nd best rookie, Guan Yu Zhu, 3rd place overall. Then it's George Russell, Sergio Sette Camara and Alessio Lorandi in the top 6. Mikkel Jensen 7th, Lance Stroll more points in 8th place. Callum Ilott 9th, Ben Barnicoat the 3rd best rookie in 10th place. Ryan Vetter 11th, Harrison Newey 12th, Antoine Hubert from the back 13th, Pedro Piquet 14th, Arjun Maini 15th, 16th place after dropping time on the first lap. Nick Cassidy and then we lost from the race after contact with a broken front suspension. Nikita Mazepin. Joel Eriksson had a broken front wing and retired from the race. Nico Kari retired early on as well, and Zycon Lee retired from the race also. So we had 16 finishes in the race itself, and Max Gunther is at the fastest lap of the race with just a couple of laps to go. There he is, and some win that was, and he's got another pole position. You get 3 poles, you want 3 wins, but if you can get 2 wins and a 5th and walk away as the championship leader, that'll be not a bad weekend, will it? So Gunther, there you go, confirmation leads by 15 points now in the championship. Still pretty tight, but we've got a new points leader. Ralph Aron has moved up to 2nd place in the standings. Nick Cassidy 3rd, and Lance Stroll 4th. So, and there's only 4 points between those 3. So it is a Prema 1, 2, 3, 4 at the moment. Joel Eriksson, no points in that race. Still 5th though for Motorpark with 40 points. Guan Yu Zhu up to 6th place for Motorpark on 38. Mikkel Jensen keeps plugging away and is in 7th place in the point standings. And there you see the rest of the drivers that have picked up points. Now 18 drivers of the 20 we've got here this weekend having picked up points. Or so 17, because Raoul Hyman was a points finisher at Paul Ricard and not picked up points because he's not raced. So while we wait for the podiums, let's take a look back at some of the highlights from another very good race here at the Hungaroring. So there, some highlights from another pretty frenetic, and at times fascinating race from Formula 3. Not quite the sparkle of race 1, which was a race to remember, but still very interesting. Still had its moments, still some good overtaking. The moves from Sergio Sete Camara, from Alessio Lorandi, and from Guan Yu Zhu, all very good manoeuvres. There you can see again confirmation of the results. Guan Yu Zhu's move, of course, to get him onto the podium with that move halfway through the race on George Russell, having followed him and followed him and followed him. He figured out a weakness, found a way through at turn number 1, and that was a well-executed manoeuvre from Guan to pick up his 2nd third place finish in only his 5th race in Formula 3. So there, confirmation of the rest of the results. We're going to get the podiums soon. Max Gunther, Ralph Aron and Guan Yu Zhu, the top 3 overall. Ralph Aron, Guan Yu Zhu and Ben Barnicoat, the top 3 rookies drivers. In terms of the rookies standings, Joel Eriksson leading that points situation coming into this race after the podium, the overall podium that he picked up earlier on. But of course his gap will now have come down somewhat because he was somebody else that didn't manage to finish in the points in that race. And there is Ben Barnicoat, who's going to be making his way up onto the podium, the rookie podium, and picking David Hale, the man very much one of the men, he and Ollie Oakes involved in the high-tech team. Very good at listening and learning and making a good solid start. There he is, the British driver, with a much needed drink of water. Pretty hot out there, I imagine, but as I say, super fit, these drivers. I'd be on the floor by now. I'm back. These drivers barely break a sweat. Hard enough walking around the pits, to be honest. Never mind driving a car at 280 kilometres an hour for 33 minutes. There's Guan Yu Zhu, closest to the camera there. Very talented young driver. They're all looking at the results, see themselves on the screen as well. As Ralph Aron, Mercedes-Benz Power providing the engines for the Prema Power team, who are going to pick up yet another trophy. It's turning into a good weekend for them so far. Not for Nick Cassidy, unfortunately. He's had a real nightmare. But as a whole, the team with 4 drivers right up there in the championship. There in the background, you can see Mika Salo, who's going to present some of our trophies in this race. The ex-Formula 1 racer who raced, of course, for Ferrari. There's a Ferrari connection with Guan Yu Zhu, who is one of their upcoming drivers. But it's this man who leaps up onto the top step of the podium, Maximilian Gunther, with his second win of the season with the championship lead. He wins from pole position. His teammate Ralph Aron in second place. And Guan Yu Zhu up onto the podium in third place. Prema winning, of course, the team's race in that one. And now we get the national anthem, the German national anthem for Max Gunther.
Congratulations, guys.
So well done to our race winner, Max Gunther. We've got another race to come tomorrow, of course, here. Join us for that one. It starts at 11:15 local time. So many thanks. Well done to Max Gunther from me, Chris Hartley, and the team, as Miko Sala, the ex-Formula 1 racer, presents the trophy to our race winner, Max Gunther. Hope you enjoyed the coverage today. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again tomorrow. So Mika Salo, who stood in for Michael Schumacher in 1999 when he broke his leg at Silverstone for Ferrari, got onto the podium, almost won a race for the German Grand Prix, presenting the trophies there. And the race winner, Max Gunther, will be looking forward to pole position and maybe another race victory here tomorrow. The race starts at 11:15. From me, Chris Hartley, and everybody, it's goodbye from Hungary.